Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn and today I am going to be making some resin coasters. These ones are going to be Christmas themed. So I've chosen the two latest paper collection releases from Graphic 45. This one is from the Warm Wishes collection. Then I'm also going to be using the DCE Twas the Night Before Christmas that also recently released. And then this one is Let It Snow, which I believe is from last year. It's the Christmas collection from last year. And what I'm doing is I've already chosen a die in different shapes to go along with the shape of the coasters I'll be creating. And I've die cut certain portions out of the pattern paper to feature onto my coasters. And what I'm doing now is sealing all of these die cut pieces in Mod Podge. You could use, if you wanted, you could use just any good quality PVA glue. You just want to make sure that it's low water content, that way your paper doesn't warp. And the reason to do this, and I make sure to brush the glue on in multiple directions, being sure to brush off the paper and brush onto the paper outside the edges, because I want to make sure the edges are nice and sealed as well. And the reason to do this is because when this paper gets encapsulated into resin, the resin actually could seep into it and then change the appearance of the paper. And you may want to experiment to see what effect resin might have, because it's going to be different for every paper, just due to the different inks that are used, the different ways the papers are processed, and the paper quality itself, how thick it is. Resin can have the effect of maybe blurring text. So if you want your text to remain legible, then sealing it like I'm doing here would be necessary. And resin can also make some papers have a very translucent look. Kind of think about paper once you've maybe poured a little bit of water on it and it looks damp. You know how water has sort of that effect of making it look a little bit translucent. Resin can have that effect too. So that could be cool, and it could be a look that you're going for, but you may want to experiment before you kind of on maybe a section of paper that you don't care too much about before you actually put it into your project. So I am planning on making 3 sets of 4 coasters each. But I bought this set of silicone coaster molds, which only has one of each shape. And so that's why I thought, well, I want each set of coasters to be the same shape, but I'll just make, one coaster in each of the different shapes. And that way you actually get to see all the different paper collections that I'm using as well. But I'll ultimately aim to make 4 coasters featuring each of the 3 paper collections that I've got. And my resin is a 2-part epoxy resin that is mixed 1-to-1 by volume. And I think in my last video I might have mistakenly said that it's by weight, but you definitely want to just read the instructions on your resin, because they're all different. Some resins are mixed 2-to-1, and I don't know, but I think it's possible some are mixed, that they are mixed by weight as opposed to by volume. So you just want to check and follow the directions closely, because if you get those ratios off, then there's the potential that you don't have enough hardener to actually make your final piece firm and hard. It could end up being like a very bendy plastic, and it may be fully cured, but because there wasn't enough hardener, it's not as firm or hard as you would want. And so I'm going to experiment with different ways of coloring the resin. And with this blue one, I've actually mixed in two different blue colored mica, which gives you this really nice pearlescent sheen. And it's a nice way to color your resin without it feeling too opaque. But I did throw in some glitter. I threw in some like a silvery white glitter, and I think that sort of has the feel of snowfall in the sky. And that's the look that I was going for. And I didn't pour out enough resin to fill my mold. So these these molds are really cool because the final coaster will actually have a little bit of a lip or like a retaining wall. So, you know how when you have a cold drink and your glass begins to sweat a little and you might have that condensation on the outside of your glass? Well, with coasters like these, if that condensation kind of spills out or drips onto your coaster, there's going to be this nice retaining wall that kind of keeps it contained. So I love the design of this, and what that means is that I can actually make the full coaster without my paper embedded in it just yet. And then when this fully cures and or fully dries to the touch and is nice and hard, then I can work on applying the paper layer later. And you'll see that in a bit. But this first part, I'm just focused on filling these coaster molds completely. And I didn't quite mix up enough resin. So one thing you'll want to do is you want to actually just maybe pour some water into your molds and then measure, how much water it can hold. What I ended up doing was I didn't quite have enough for the hexagon coaster, so I just poured off what I had into these smaller round gold molds for a little bit of a side project because you don't want that to go to waste. And every resin has a certain amount of pot time, meaning the working time before it starts to harden. And so I wanted to just pour that off onto a side project. It's always a good idea just to have some extra molds because if you do have extra resin, instead of having that go to waste, you can just use it in different molds. And with the gold here, this is similar to my blue where I did use a gold mica powder and then mixing in some gold glitter. On those two side projects, I put in some gilding flakes as well, which I think will look good for that project, but I didn't want that look for my Graphic 45 coasters. On the red one, I forgot to mention, because I didn't have a red mica, I used the only red alcohol ink that I had, but that ended up being too pinky. So I decided to just stick with red. I packed it even more full of red glitter so that I can get the color that I wanted. And so here the coasters have had 24 hours to dry. They are nice and hard. Usually the full sort of curing process of a coaster might be a couple weeks, just depending on your climate. But these are nice and they're dry, they're hard, they're not bendy or anything. So it's fine to start kind of working with them on the next phase here. And that is to apply our paper. So what I'm doing is, again, I'm using some Mod Podge and I'm gluing it down to the coaster. And that's because I want it to have a very firm stick. And I don't want that paper to start floating up. I don't want any resin to seep underneath and potentially form a little bubble or make the paper look warped. And that's why I'm also burnishing to really make sure that it's got a really nice firm contact. It's nice and smooth. And I'm also making sure to brush on some more Mod Podge all the way around the corner or the edges as well, because I want to make sure those edges are sealed in again, to prevent resin from seeping underneath the paper. And this is why I was saying earlier that I really like this mold, because I can make the full coaster first. And now when I go to place my paper, I can work from top side and really have a good look at the final sort of finishing touch. And if there are bubbles as I pour my resin, I can pop those bubbles. I can see what I'm working on, as opposed to when I made my Halloween coasters. That I worked basically kind of in reverse order, where the top side or the front was face down. So I couldn't see what I was working on, and the pretty side was face down. So, there was no way to see what was going on until I was completely done, and there was no way to fix it. So here it's really nice to be able to see everything, and you can really focus on how everything is, the final product is going to look. And so all I'm doing here is pouring on some clear resin, and I don't want to pour this all the way up to the top, because I like having that retaining wall. I like keeping that little lip, but I just want enough to completely cover the paper so that it's not, none of it's exposed. It's completely encapsulated. And then I can take, as you saw, my heat gun to it and pop any bubbles that come to the edge or to the top surface. And the nice thing is that at this point, it's such a thin layer of resin that the bubbles are going to come up to the surface pretty quickly. So here's a look at 2 out of the 4. I haven't quite made all of them just yet, but you can see it's got that really nice glossy look. The other thing about working with these coasters is, because glitter does tend to sink, since this was a top-down mold, all of that glitter did sink, but that ends up being the front or the top of your coaster. So that's why you'll maybe notice that the top looks like it's very dense with glitter, but when I flip it to the back doesn't look like it quite has as much glitter. But I like that, because that's, you want that glitter. If you're going to add glitter, you want it to be visible, or at least I do. So the last thing that I'll do with these, once I have all 4 in each set made, is to put some of those little silicone feet on the bottom. That way it doesn't slide around your table. And then I can create some boxes and send these as gifts for the holidays. I hope that you enjoyed my coasters today. If you did, please consider liking, commenting, and sharing. And if you want to catch new videos as I post them, consider subscribing to my channel and ringing that notification bell. Thanks so much. Until next time, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye.